Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. It's been a very busy summer for us Michigan fans on the recruiting trail, and I feel like we've been so busy breaking down commitments and talking about what's next and talking about these high-profile recruiting battles that we haven't totally taken a step back and evaluated what Michigan has done up until this point in the 2026 cycle. And, as fall camp rolls around, our focus is going to be a little bit more on the 2025 season than the recruiting trail. Feel like now is a really good time to, for lack of better terms, wrap up the 2026 cycle up until this point. And look, if we got commitments to break down, we're going to break them down. But what does Michigan have so far in this class? That's what I want to talk about. And there's no better way to do it than handing out some class superlatives and, taking a look at this class in 2026 and say, hey, who are the guys that are going to have the biggest day one impact? Who are the guys that we think have the highest ceilings in this 2026 cycle? Who are the hidden gems of this 2026 class? And, as I was going through my notes and kind of classifying some of these football players, there was one thing that stood out to me very, very clearly. There's a little bit of a shift in terms of what Michigan wanted to do building their class in 2026, and they were really leaning into, at least seemingly, really leaned into athletic profiles. They were hunting for big athletes who run really, really fast. And, that's a little bit of a change than what we saw with Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh was, pretty stingy and hell-bent on just bringing in good football players. And it obviously worked for Jim Harbaugh. You talk about a roster and then developing that roster, did a very good job. Sherrone Moore betting on athletic profiles, betting on athletes, which as a Michigan fan myself, following this program kind of excites me because I look at Michigan and say, hey, there's one thing I know about this program. It is one of the best, if not the best, in the country at developing football players. And, I think you look at it and say, hey, give Michigan all the best athletes across the country, make them good football players. That seems to be a really good recipe for Sherrone Moore in this Michigan program. And that seems to be a little bit of the goal with this 2026 class, because you start running down the list and say the amount of athletic profiles, the amount of cats with high ceilings in this 2026 cycle, it's a little bit different than what we've seen from this Michigan program in years past. We're going to have a lot of guys to talk about with the highest ceilings in this class. Before we get into it, as always, the Michigan fans, just want to say thank you to you guys, man. As a Michigan fan myself, it has been so freaking fun talking this program on the recruiting trail. The amount of support that y'all have shown the fellas in the dog days of the summer, been amazing. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into it. Hey, one other thing I'll say, look, if you're in Michigan, this ain't no flashy commitment episode where, the casuals be watching it. If you're watching this episode, chances are you follow the recruiting trail pretty dang closely. Would love to hear some superlatives that you guys would give out as well. Without further ado, let's get into it. Biggest day one impact. This one to me is pretty obvious. Travis Johnson at wide receiver. It's a combination of, I think this is a football player that is very, very developed at the position. I think he has that body type that is day one ready in the Big Ten. Hey, 6'3", 185, can attack all three levels at the football field. One of the more polished wide receivers that you see in the 2026 cycle. Go back to the conversation we had comparing Travis Johnson to Calvin Russell. Calvin Russell's upside is immense. I mean, one of the highest upsides that you see across the country in 2026, but it wasn't necessarily the most day one polished ready guy. And that was always my concern with Calvin Russell. If you were to allocate so much money and funds to Calvin Russell, I don't know if you'd see the benefit of that until year 3 of his college football career. Look at Travis Johnson and say, look, you don't have the ceiling that Calvin Russell does as a pass catcher. This dude is about as day one ready as it gets. So you combine a frame that's day one ready, you combine a prospect that's day one ready, and then you look at Michigan's wide receiver and say, hey, there's going to be an opportunity if you can play to get into the rotation early. Would not be surprised at all if Travis Johnson is a guy that is contributing as a freshman in the 2026 year. Very similar conversation. They're different football players, but very similar conversation we had with Andrew Marsh last year. Like Andrew Marsh was not going to wow you with the size, speed profile, but was a dang good wide receiver. I kind of feel the same way about a guy like Travis Johnson as well. Going into the next conversation, that is the highest ceilings. And this is where it gets fun for me as a Michigan fan, because I look at these guys and say, hey, we got a bunch of guys that have the potential to be top 10 NFL draft picks. And you have to start with Carter Meadows. Look, is Carter Meadows the best football player in the country right now? No. In fact, there's a long ways to go for Carter Meadows if he wants to be this kind of guy for Michigan over the next couple of years. But the ceiling is about as high as you see anybody in the country. I mean, he's 6'6", he's 225. He's an amazing basketball player that shows how explosive and dynamic of an athlete he is. You ain't going to find guys that are as big and long as Carter Meadows that move the way Carter Meadows does. The ability to be flexible, the ability to be bendy. Now, the thing with Carter Meadows is, one, he needs to learn the sport a little bit more and learn how to use that length. And he's just got to put on a little bit more weight too and get that play strength right. If he does those two things, the upside's immense with Carter Meadows. And what should excite Michigan fans is, look, Michigan has one of the, in my opinion, one of the best strength and conditioning programs that we see in the country. Like, guys get right physically in the weight room. And then you combine that with what Lou Esposito has shown us he can do developing football players. This just made so much sense for Carter Meadows to come to Michigan. Now, it's not going to be year one, in my opinion, for Carter Meadows, but you look up and look at year two, year three, has the opportunity to be one of the best pass rushers in the country. Very similar to the conversation we had with David Ojabo, who it took 18 months before he was ready. But when he was ready, he became one of the best pass rushers in the country. Very similar conversation with Carter Meadows. There are not many players that have the upside that Carter Meadows brings. Here's another one, Zion Robinson. Another guy very similar to Carter Meadows, where the athletic profile is dynamite. You know, he is 6'3", 180, state champ in the long jump, 10'9" in the 100-meter dash. Not a ton of production yet at the high school ranks, only 550 yards as a junior. You ain't going to – it's hard. You can't teach it. You can't teach 6'3", 180 with the explosiveness and speed Zion Robinson has. Now, there are some technical things that need to get cleaned up, especially with him as a route runner, but you know he has the athletic profile to do it. Michigan is leaning in on size and speed in the wide receiver room. I think that's music to a lot of Michigan fans' ears, because we just haven't had that kind of playmaking ability in a really long time in the pass catcher room. Last one with the really high ceiling, and what I love about this one, and this is really why I think Michigan pushed their chips in the way they did, Malachi Lee. Now, here's what's unique about Malachi Lee is, at least in my opinion, Carter Meadows and Zion Robinson, I view as guys that probably have a longer ways to go, but have really high upside. Malachi Lee has immense upside, 36-inch arms, 85-inch wingspan, really, really good athlete for a 320-pound body. But at the same time, he's a pretty dang good football player right now. And so it's like, hey, the floor seems to be high. The ceiling seems to be really high. That's what excites me the most about Malachi Lee is I think you're going to get a multi-year starter, but I also think you have a guy that very well could go top 15 in the NFL draft as well. Really, really, probably my favorite prospect in the 2026 cycle for Michigan. Going to the hidden gems, like, who are the guys that are committed in the 2026 cycle that nobody seems to be really talking about? I got a great one. Well, Tariq Bani from the DMV area. Tariq Bani from Washington, D.C., he committed to Michigan way back in the spring. Low three-star guy, didn't get a ton of excitement from Michigan fans, and understandably so. And look, does he have the ceiling that Carter Meadows does? No, 6'1", 235. It's a far cry from the 6'6" length that Carter Meadows has. Tariq Bani might, and I don't say this lightly, because the defensive line class that Michigan has is loaded. Tariq Bani might be the best football player on the defensive line as we speak. You turn on the film and say it's very clear why Michigan is betting on a 6'1" edge rusher in Tariq Bani. Although he does not make your jaw drop when he enters a room, this kid is really, he's a little shorter, really compact, really powerful guy. And when he's 6'1", his ability to play with good leverage and get underneath bigger, longer offensive tackles, it's elite. And then his first step, his ability to be bendy and flexible on the edge. Tariq Bani's a really good football player. Doesn't necessarily have all that athletic profile upside that some of the other names that we've talked about have. we've seen Michigan have a lot of success with these kind of football players going back to the Jim Harbaugh era where, hey, we're going to bet on the good football players and just kind of say they're going to figure it out at the Big Ten level. And Tariq Bond is a guy that I think there's a reason Michigan took him so early because he's a really good football player. The wild card. I used to call this the boomer bust. I didn't really like that term. I like the wild card better. Hey, not really sure what it's going to look like, but it's going to be kind of exciting. I'm going to go with Markel Dabney. Virginia kid, projected to play linebacker. Just not really sure what it's going to look like because he's never played linebacker at the high school ranks. Now, what excites me about Markel Dabney, really good athlete in space, and that is something that Michigan has leaned into at the linebacker position. We need guys that can run, chase, tackle, drop back in coverage. Markel Dabney, as a very experienced safety at the high school ranks, very clearly capable of playing in space. You're just not sure what it's going to look like as he transitions to off-ball linebacker. Like, number one, how big is he going to get? Is he going to get up to around 230, 235 pounds? That's certainly a question. The second question is, hey, is he going to be physically imposing enough to play linebacker in the Big Ten? That means taking on blocks. That means getting off blocks. That means fitting the run. We got a lot of question marks about Markel Dabney, which makes him kind of a wild card, but you also understand the vision. You also understand why Michigan's taken a flyer on Markel Dabney as well. Now, I think it's really crucial. You go back to Michigan's class, it's really crucial to land a guy like DQ Forkput and Nick Abrams. You look at Michigan and say you don't want your only linebacker in your 2026 class being a wild card like Markel Dabney is. Last one, the blue chip. And when I say the blue chip, it's not necessarily because he's a four-star prospect, but it's a guy that I look at and say, look, is he going to be a top 10 NFL draft pick like I think Malachi Lee has the ability to? No. But a guy that I just feel like is going to be a dang good football player for Michigan, a multi-year contributor. I'm going to go to Marky Wahlberg on the offensive line. No, excuse me. Number one, versatility. A guy that can play guard and tackle. I think he's got a chance to stick at guard for Michigan, but I also think it's going to be hard to get on the football field at tackle for Michigan. You know, you look at Andrew Sprague's got 4 years. Yeah, Babaloa, Ty Haywood just came in. You got Malachi Lee coming in as well. It's not going to be easy to get on the field at tackle. Okay, well, that's good. Marky Wahlberg can also play guard. In fact, I think that might be his better position. Reminds me a little bit of Carson Barnhart. You know, Carson Barnhart, more valuable than I think many of us Michigan fans appreciated, where he would play tackle for us, kick in the guard. He kind of do what we needed him to do. I look at Marky Wahlberg. I think it's going to be a similar story where it's probably not going to be a year one, year two starter, but getting into year three, year four, year five of his career, I think can be that utility offensive lineman that can slot in at you at a lot of different positions. And by year four, year five, probably going to be a dang good starter for Michigan up front. I don't think he's going to go top 50 in the NFL draft. In fact, I would be surprised if he goes top 100. Wouldn't be surprised if he makes it in the NFL and sticks around for 10, 15 years, because you look at this kid and say, hey, 6'6", working up to 300 pounds, really, one, tough as nails, but polished individual. Like, he knows what he's doing. He's got a really good feel for playing offensive line. This is not a guy that you have to come in and completely rework. I don't know if he's ever going to be a first-team All-Big Ten guy, but probably going to be a guy that you can rely on to play multiple different spots on the offensive line, which really is a valuable asset to have, especially in this era of college football where it's really hard to maintain your depth. You know, it's really hard to have 8, 9 guys that you trust on the offensive line. Marky Wahlberg going to be a guy that, even if he's not a starter his first couple of years, probably a reliable factor for this offensive line for the next 5. Those are the superlatives I have. Left off a lot of really, really good football players. I mean, I look at Titan Davis and Alistair Vallejo, didn't even talk about them. I look at Julian Walker. That's another immensely high upside type of guy. Really solid class for Michigan in 2026 that we think is going to get better over the next couple of days and weeks. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.